Hey guys, this is Vinny.
And this is Joe.
On this episode, we are going to do the unthinkable. Joe and I are going to debunk our own Dragon Ball Super power scaling chart. Many of you already know that Joe and I and V&J Reviews have created what is likely one of the most accurate power scaling charts. And in fact, it truly is. There has been many people who have even contacted us and some others who are doing some things who have figured out sort of the same scaling we have, and some of them in different ways using things like logarithmic scales. We've of course gotten our inspiration from the inverse cube scale, which we've used to design a 2-scale system. But there are many who are starting to figure out that these things can be scaled correctly, and there's a few ways to do it. We've created our own system. However, many of you may not know that there is a small community of people out there in the Dragon Ball fandom who decide when they don't like something that's out there, especially scales, they feel like it's their job to make sure that anything they see as a threat to what is truth is immediately debunked or brought down to its knees. And because our chart has sort of gained some steam and it's sort of getting out there with over 150,000 views on our one chart and about 50,000 views on the other chart, we are all of a sudden the target of many of these people. So we figured, why not just debunk our own chart on our own channel and make it easy for them so they don't even have to do the work. Now, of course, when we say debunk our own chart, we really mean we're going to point out some of the flaws with it because it still remains the absolute best chart we have ever seen, but we're going to go ahead and do this for you. So I'm going to point out the first one, and Joe and I are going to go back and forth and just list out for you some of the issues that are out there. Number one issue, these individuals will always point out that the reason that they rip apart or debunk other people's stuff is because they want only the truth to be out there. They feel like many people are trying to deceive them when it comes to the Dragon Ball universe, and they would actually say that we're trying to deceive you guys. We will tell you right off the bat, we are not trying to deceive anyone. We sat down one day and plugged through the mathematical numbers, and we actually realized by creating a 2-chart system originating from Toriyama's old numbers that we could create a scaling system that worked and worked well. So there is no deception here. This is complete truth. We just felt like we would put it out there and see what happened. And it blew up, and people started to realize this is different than anything they've ever seen before. So right off the bat, debunking their point number one, we are not here to deceive anybody. So anyone who would claim that is absolutely ridiculous and wrong. And you should immediately, if you see those people doing that, if you can have your voice heard, we listen to your voices on our channel. We hope they would listen to your voices as well. And if they don't, that's obviously something you need to deal with between you and them. The second point they'll bring up is the fact that Toriyama's numbers are old hat. They cannot be used. He had those numbers for Battle of the Gods and not for anything else. And to even think you can use those numbers is wrong. We understand that he got these numbers, he developed these numbers years ago. We know that. We're not stupid. We understand that. And was Dragon Ball Super in the works? Not officially. Does it mean that the guy wasn't thinking about Dragon Ball Super but never mentioned it? Of course he probably was thinking about it, but it was nothing official. We know it was for Battle of the Gods. But what we wanted to do was see if we could go back to those original numbers and convert them into a scale that would work. We realized we couldn't use just his scale alone. It was never going to happen. It was never going to work. But by converting it to a new scale and applying it to all of the evidences we have seen, would it work when we use the multipliers on the old scale? And it did. So if it worked, if the scaling worked, then we're going to show everyone that this works. And we're going to reveal to everyone what the true scaling looks like to the best of our ability. So the fact that they bring up that these are old numbers, it's meaningless because if this scaling works, that doesn't say anything to you. So they're old numbers. They were used a couple years ago. If we can make a correct scaling chart using them, we're going to do that. And so that's what we did. And the last bit I'm going to talk about before I let Joe hit another one is that some people will say that we're not even using an inverse cube scale. And I want to set the record straight on this. It was the inverse cube scale that gave us the inspiration to do this. See, we didn't want to just make up some random universal chart. We wanted to model it after something that was real, that energy sources in real life are modeled after. And you have inverse square charts that are used for things like light, and inverse cube charts that are used for things like magnetic fields and radiation. We felt like the magnetic cube chart would actually be a better fit. So we took that idea and we flipped it into what is really just a cubing chart. We understand that, we get that, but the inspiration was really from the inverse cubed charts. I don't want to get too heady with all this stuff, but it inspired us to create a second universal chart, which we did. Now, once we created that chart, we knew we had to apply the multipliers to the first chart, which was the linear chart, because multipliers are always applied on the linear chart. We were just the very first ones to realize you had to create a two-chart system in order to do this. And now I'm going to let Joe plug into this one, because the next thing they'll bring up is the fact that on our first chart, which is amazing, it really kind of got things rolling, we didn't account for the fact that Goku absorbed the God Ki into his base form.
So during Battle of the Gods, at one point, we find out that Goku absorbed the God Ki into his base. So on our first chart, we didn't really account for that, but on our second one, we did account for it, and we actually doubled the power of the God Ki, because if he absorbs it into his base, then obviously if he goes red again, he sort of has a little bit more power there, so we just doubled it there to account for that. A lot of people are still talking about that. We haven't done it, but we are trying to make sure that we have the scale as closely as possible.
Now, another thing a lot of people are saying is that Beerus was stated as going only 70% against Goku as he was in the red, but when you look at our chart, a lot of people will mention, well, Beerus didn't need to go 70%, so what's up with that? Why does it look like there's such a big difference there?
Well, actually, if you go back to the fight, you can really tell that this is a guy who isn't really even trying against Goku. I mean, he's using his 70% and actually destroying him in this fight. At one point, you actually even see him just like doing flicks of power balls, and then Goku has to really try and make sure that he can stop them. I mean, he is going maybe 70% at one point during this fight, but he's making sure he's winning. I mean, and in the end, you can see he did win with 70%, as he should, because Goku on our scale is only like a 228 maybe at that time, but he wanted to make sure he was going to win. And basically, if you look at the fight and you think about the numbers, it actually makes sort of sense why Beerus in the end isn't even hurt almost at the end. He doesn't even look winded or even have like a scratch if you really look at him, and the numbers make sense for that reason.
So basically the idea is this. Beerus did not need to go to 70% to actually beat Goku in the red form. He went to 70%, but when you take the evidence of the fight in hand, you can see at 70% he is handedly defeating Goku, almost as if Goku is still not even close to him, which our chart would indicate. What's interesting is a lot of people with these crazy exponential chart values have Goku at such a low level that Beerus could go to 1% and still handedly beat him. On our chart, it actually is far more realistic, but we will tell you right now, Goku in the red form was not that close to Beerus in that fight. A lot of people think that Beerus went to 70% and Goku was at 60% and they were kind of close. It's just not real. It's just not true. And when you look at the facts of the fight, go rewatch it yourselves if you want. You will see Beerus is easily beating him, which our chart would show. So we actually think that our chart reveals that we got that 100% correct. In addition, there was some people that had stated on our first chart we doubled Red's power, Goku in the God form Red, to get blue. Now, we did that on the universal scale, and we were actually pretty close in the scaling by doing that. But like we said before, we created a second scale that is far more accurate, and we applied the 50 multiplier on the linear scale, and then applied that to universal universal scale and got an even more accurate number. So we did apply the 50 times multiplier on that second scale. So we would encourage you, if you have not seen that scale yet, to go ahead and check that out. In addition, anyone who's looking at our scale and thinking, wait, it only looks like blue is a little stronger than red, or like 2 or 3 times stronger than red, you have to understand it's a converted scale, meaning if you go a little bit higher in the scale, you are getting increasingly and even exponentially stronger than somebody who's just a little bit lower than you. See, it's not a linear scale, and that's sort of the whole point there. When you're doing this scaling, you're not looking at a linear scale like, oh, it looks like Goku in the blue is only 2 or 3 times stronger than red. He's not. He is 50 times stronger than the red. It's just when you convert it to this scale, it doesn't exactly look like that. But the scaling itself is correct on both the universal chart and on Toriyama's old chart. Another thing that's also brought up a few times is the fact that I said that Goku went 20 times Kaioken when he was fighting KEFLA. And so, to be honest with you, no one is actually 100% sure what value of Kaioken Goku went when he was fighting KEFLA. There has been times in the past where Goku has used a Kaioken, and we needed somebody to actually tell us, like Whis, what Kaioken he was doing, because he never actually stated it. Here, Goku says Kaioken, so many people assume it's just a regular Kaioken attack. But we know that it was more than that, because if you rewatch that fight, Goku powers up again in Kaioken before he fights KEFLA. So it's most likely that Goku is probably using a 10 times Kaioken instead of the 20 times Kaioken, which we will take the wrong on that one. I mean, I'll take the wrong. But the fact of the matter is, guys, when you do these sorts of videos and you're talking for as long as we are, a lot of times you're not thinking through every little detail, and so sometimes things like that slip out. So I was wrong probably. Instead of saying 20 times Kaioken, I should have said 10 times Kaioken. But of course, those are things we update and fix on future scales. I'm going to let Joe handle this one, because a lot of people will say that Jiren, we placed him as an 11, should not be above Beerus on this chart.
So we do actually have some evidence that points to Jiren being maybe stronger than Beerus. What I want to do is I want to go back to some things that Whis said. Whis talked about a mortal that is stronger than a god of destruction. And then he goes on to state that this god of destruction happens to be stronger than Beerus. Now, Beerus does downplay it as he is just arm wrestling him and he isn't really stronger. But I'm going to believe Whis knows when somebody is stronger than another person and that this guy is stronger than Beerus. And then continuing on episode 109, we figure out that Jiren is in fact the guy who is stronger than a god of destruction, because once again, Whis actually tells us that almost word for word. So we can pretty much connect these two statements and say that this guy is going to be stronger than Beerus, because this is what Whis is sort of telling us. So that's why we put him at 11 on this chart, because there is evidence that actually points to it. I know a lot of people maybe have missed it and whatnot, but this is where we're getting our information from, is from Whis. Now, I also know in the manga that the person who he arm wrestled was actually Quintella, the rat, god of destruction. But there's so many differences between the manga and the anime. This is probably just one of those few differences where it's not actually maybe Quintella that he faced. I mean, technically we don't know 100%, but that's what they're pointing to and showing at this point. So I just want to make sure you guys know that. We do know about the manga and everything as well.
With that said, one thing that we are changing on future scales is the fact that we believe Beerus could possibly be stronger than a 10. So it may be in fact true that Beerus could still take out Jiren, but not because we placed Jiren wrong, but because we may have underestimated the power of Beerus, especially if he has some understanding of Ultra Instinct, which has been indicated. Not that he's mastered it, but he does know it. And so if he does, we're going to put an up arrow on Beerus, indicating that he could likely go much higher than this 10 number that we have. So we like Jiren's placement, but we are going to shift up on Beerus. So with all of that said, guys, those are really the main points that are being brought up, and we wanted to go ahead and debunk our own chart before someone else out there did that. So we want to let you know, if you see anyone else out there going, basically, you know what, we're going to make sure that everyone knows how wrong V and J is. just as nicely as you can let them know, just tell them, look, you're a little late to the party here. V&J Reviews already did that on their own channel and basically save them a whole bunch of time. Because when it comes down to it, the fact of the matter is the scaling on our chart is actually very much right on. And the smartest people out there know it. There are people who do have channels who do understand that our scaling is actually very, very precise. But that doesn't include everyone who hates Toriyama's numbers, who hates trying to scale these things, who have seen these power chart numbers and think that we're trying to deceive you guys. We are not trying to do anything like that. We spent some time sitting down, thinking through these numbers. We did the multiplications. We looked over and over and over again at all these episodes, and we made sure that the evidence fit with the numbers and fit with the charts. And when it worked, we put it out there for you guys, and it works. Did we make a few mistakes here and there? Yes. But as we update our charts each time, we fix those mistakes and we make it more precise. And we are coming out with more charts, guys. We're going to be placing people like KEFLA on here. You are not going to believe where KEFLA falls on this chart. You definitely wait for that one to come out. We're going to be placing Golden Frieza on this chart. We're going to be placing other fighters. So go ahead and stick with us on this one. Just know we are putting in the time and the effort and the thought on this as much to even debunk our own things before other people have to waste their time doing that. So we figured we would do this for you guys, and we thought that you guys would appreciate the fact that we are a channel who is willing to do this to ourselves, and that you guys would respect that.
And one of the biggest things that sort of confirmed this chart to me is just the amount of likes that we are getting on this, amount of comments, and how many people like it. Because I think you guys understand that this is a chart that actually looks right, makes sense, that you guys can actually use the chart yourself. That's what's really fun about this chart, is that you guys can actually look at it and do the multipliers and figure out maybe the chart for yourselves and use it in your own ways. It's just a great thing, I think, for the whole community, and I think you guys understand it, and I'm so glad you guys are confirming it with your comments and everything, and continue watching it and grow it with us, because we're going to develop this chart as we go.
As always, we hope you guys enjoyed this one. This is Vinny.
And this is Joe.
Until next time.